Alright, let's get right into it. On October 31st, 2025, Cameroon's main opposition leader, Tchiroma Bakary, made this extraordinary announcement. He claims that soldiers, we are talking members of Cameroon's own military, had just escorted him to safety. He called them loyalist soldiers. Now, that phrase, that's what's sparking all this intense speculation. People are asking, are there splits, like divisions inside Cameroon's security apparatus? So here is the situation on the ground right now. President Biya is 92 years old. He was just declared the winner of a really disputed election back on October 12. The Constitutional Council, they announced on October 27 that Biya won, saying he got about 53.6% of the vote. Well, opposition leaders, they immediately rejected those results. They are alleging fraud, talking about dead voters on the voters register, all kinds of ballot irregularities. And within days, protests just erupted. We saw them in major cities across Cameroon. And the government response, it was severe and it was intense. We are hearing from civil society groups. They are reporting at least 23 deaths so far, over 500 arrests. And this is just between October 26th and 28th. Now, security forces were using live ammunition, tear gas, water cannons, all of it against protesters. We also saw internet disruptions documented by monitoring organizations starting around October 23rd. Then, on October 31st, Tchiroma calls for this 3-day nationwide shutdown. From November 3rd to 5th, halt all economic activity, no businesses, no work, no market. And the response, it started immediately, even before the stated date, because in Maruwa, that's the capital of the far north, merchants and traders started closing their shops even before the official protest date. Students just stayed home from school. And then came that military protection claim. Tchiroma announced right on social media that soldiers, according to him, loyalist soldiers, had escorted him to a secure location. Reporters asked Cameroon's Ministry of Defense about this, but they declined comment. This whole situation, it resonates way beyond just Cameroon. You think about Nigeria's EndSARS movement back in 2020. Ghana's Fix the Country protest in 2021. We are seeing African youth increasingly challenging this entrenched leadership, and they are using digital mobilization to do it. So in this episode, we are going to examine exactly how this ghost town protest developed. We are looking at Tchiroma's escape, his resistance strategy, and what these claims of military protection, what they would really mean for Biya's hold on power, and frankly, for Africa's entire political landscape. Let's get into it. So, what happens when an entire city just stops? Because on October 31st, 2025, the northern city of Maroc, it started to implement what's now being called the ghost town protest. And this was before the officially designated date, meaning that people are willing to continue this resistance, which is a very, very good sign for Cameroon. Now look, Issa Tchiroma Bakary, he's the guy who officially came second in that October 12th election. He released this audio message. He called for a 3-day nationwide shutdown, November 3rd to 5th. He wasn't calling for street demonstrations. He was calling for complete economic paralysis. Businesses closed, schools shuttered, markets inactive. In his message, Tchiroma basically said Cameroonians will not accept what he called electoral theft. And the response in Maruwa, it was swift, because local media reported merchants were closing up shops on October 31st, days early. Now, this went beyond even market because schools were shut too. A student reported that attendance has plummeted. Only 20 out of 50 expected students showed up at one school. The student explained it. Going out is complicated and others are afraid. And this shutdown, it is spreading. It hit cities like Douala, that's the economic hub, and Garoua, which is Tchiroma's hometown. Social media, that was the key coordination tool, because hashtags like Ghost Town Cameroon, it was all over X, Instagram, and TikTok, even Facebook. We saw videos everywhere. Empty streets, closed market stores, shuttered businesses. The economic impact was immediate because Cameroon's trade minister, he issued statements back in October 29th urging retailers to resume operations. He even acknowledged that looting and vandalism had forced a lot of these closures. But this shutdown call, that was only part of the story, because on that same day, October 31st, something else happened that would just dominate the headlines, and that was Tchiroma's announcement about military protection, and that raised all these questions about potential divisions right inside Cameroon's security forces. So, October 31st, 2025, in Garoua, the opposition leader, Issa Tchiroma Bakary, everyone believed he was under surveillance, basically under house arrest. His movement had been restricted ever since the election on October 12th. And then, on the morning of October 31st, he makes this startling announcement right on social media. He says he has been escorted to a secure location. But what made this so extraordinary was his claim about who did it. He said it was soldiers from Cameroon's own military. He stated it flat out. "I thank the Loyalist army, which has shown its patriotism by escorting me to a safe location and is currently ensuring my protection." The term Loyalist army, that was a huge framing choice, because Tchiroma was basically characterizing these soldiers not as loyal to Biya's government, but loyal to what he called the people's democratic will. This narrative, it suggests that elements inside the military might be questioning the election results. Tchiroma then framed this as part of, he called it, phase 3 of his resistance strategy. So, according to his public statement, phase 1 was the campaign, phase 2 was the legal challenges and first protest, and phase 3, this is it, the economic shutdown designed to pressure the government. And the government official response, it was limited, notably limited, because Cameroon's defense ministry, they declined to comment on Tchiroma's claims. No official denial was issued either. No arrest warrant was publicly announced, and no military statement, nothing to address these allegations that soldiers were helping an opposition figure. On social media, you can imagine Cameroonians were just debating the implications, because across social media, everyone was asking, did soldiers really protect him? What does this mean for military unity? The diaspora communities in Europe, in North America, they were deep in commentary about potential fractures. Now, opposition supporters, they were sharing messages celebrating what they saw as military personnel finally choosing sides. So the central question, it was clear. Past claims, if they were accurate, what did this reveal about divisions in armed forces? And what could that mean for the stability of Paul Biya's government going forward? Now look, let me make this clear, because in Central African political systems, military loyalty, that has always been crucial to keeping a regime stable. So, Tchiroma's claim on October 31st, it raised these fundamental questions about the cohesion of Cameroon's security apparatus. To really get the significance, you need context. African militaries, especially in Central Africa, they have traditionally been structured through patronage networks, ethnic considerations. Officers often get promotions based on loyalty to the regime. And this system, this is what has helped maintain Biya's power since 1982. In fact, just months before the election, in July 2025, Paul Biya did this major military reshuffle. He appointed new leaders to key positions, Army Chief of Staff, heads of the Navy, the Air Force. So, what evidence is there for Tchiroma's military protection claims? Well, first, you have his own direct statement on social media, naming Loyalist soldiers as his protectors. Second, the Defense Ministry's refusal to comment. They didn't confirm it, but they didn't deny it either. And observers have noted that. Third, we are hearing some reports, speculation about internal military discussions, chatter about constitutional obligations, but those, they also remain unverified. Now, regional analysts who have commented on this, they note that if mid-level officers, particularly from the far north and western regions, where Tchiroma did really well in the voting, if they were questioning others, that could represent significant institutional stress. But again, concrete evidence of widespread military defection, that has not been independently verified. Only Tchiroma's word for now. Now, history gives us some perspective here. Military interventions, they have happened elsewhere in Africa when the armed forces lost confidence in the civilian leadership. You just have to look at the recent examples. Coups in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Madagascar, all of them justified by military leaders as response to governance failure. You can even go back to Burkina Faso's Thomas Sankara. He came to power through military action back in 1983 against what they called gerontocratic rule. But skeptics are raising valid questions. They are raising some serious concerns here. Some analysts suggest Tchiroma's statement they could just be strategic messaging designed to demoralize government forces to encourage defections, even if very few have actually happened. It's possible, maybe a small unit or just a few individual officers assisted Tchiroma without representing some broader military sentiment. What is clear though is that the perception of a military division, whether it's fully accurate or just partially strategic, that perception has political consequences, because if soldiers believe other soldiers are defecting, it might just lower the barrier for them to defect too. If civilians believe that the military is divided, it could embolden them, make them continue the resistance. So, whether this is a genuine military split or just effective political theater, the situation reveals this unprecedented pressure on Biya's government, because while all these questions were swirling around military loyalty, Cameroon's elite, they are living that economic shutdown Tchiroma called for. Now, back to Biya. This Biya guy, he's already 92 years old. Right now, he is the world's oldest serving head of state. He has governed Cameroon since November 6th, to be exact, November 6th, 1982. That's 43 years. And on November 3rd, 2025, his government is going to face the full implementation of this nationwide shutdown Tchiroma had called for. We got reports from multiple cities, all documenting the shutdown's impact. In Daoula, Yaoundé, Garoua, and other cities, economic activity was significantly reduced. Markets that are normally bustling, they remain closed. Transportation services limited. Schools reduced to minimal attendance. Biya's position is full of these tensions. He's already 92, but he's governing a young population. Cameroon's median age is only about 18 years old. According to World Bank data, a huge portion of Cameroon's youth labor force, they work in the informal sector. That means limited job security. And remember, back in 2008, Cameroon's constitution was amended. They removed presidential term limit. That's what has allowed Biya to run indefinitely. That October 27th announcement, that Biya won with 53.6%, it was immediately contested because opposition groups cited all kinds of irregularities, dead people on voter rolls, unequal distribution of ballot materials, alleged ballot stuffing. But the African Union Election Observation Mission, they stated the vote was conducted largely in accordance with regional and international standards. I'm not even surprised by their statement. That is how they always do, because election malpractice and irregularities is the trademark of the African Union. So, we have got this massive disconnect between what the opposition is claiming and what the international observers have assessed. And that post-election period is so serious violence. We know civil society organizations documented at least 23 deaths, over 500 arrests just between October 26 to 28. Now, the UN, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, they expressed alarm, called for investigations into the use of force. Even the European Union, they issued statements condemning the violent repression, calling for accountability. Now, the fundamental challenge Biya is facing is structural, an economic shutdown. It's not like a street protest you can just disperse with security forces. This operates through collective non-participation. Without businesses operating, without workers participating, government functions, they face disruption. Biya, he represents that generation that took power right after independence. He served under Cameroon's first president, Amadou Ahidjo. Today's young protesters, they were born decades into his rule. And this generational divide, it shapes this entire confrontation. So, the government isn't confronting a violent uprising. It's confronting an organized economic withdrawal. And that's a form of resistance that traditional security responses, they really struggle to address effectively. Back in Maroua Central Market, the economic cost of this shutdown, it was immediately visible. That fruit vendor, he described the situation to journalists. Since we didn't sell and closed this morning, our goods are starting to rot. We don't know what to do. And it just reflects this broader economic paralysis that is affecting thousands of workers. In Marua alone, reports said over 2,000 shops closed during this period. Vendors of perishable goods, fruits, vegetables, they faced immediate losses. Their products just deteriorated. Transport operators suspended services. The economic disruption, it was comprehensive. Now, to really understand this impact, you have to understand Cameroon's labor structure, because according to World Bank research, it shows that informal employment is a substantial portion of Cameroon's youth workforce. Those aged between 18 and 35. These informal sector workers, we are talking street vendors, motorcycle taxi drivers, market traders, daily laborers. They depend on daily earnings. They have no savings buffer, no social safety net. So when the market closes, these workers immediately lose their income. There is no unemployment compensation available. Now, Cameroon's formal economy, that's a stark contrast, because the country produces about 60,000 barrels of oil every day. 90% of that comes from the southwest region. We have Chinese investment totaling about $2.4 billion since 2006. Big projects like the Kibi Deep Sea Port, and yet youth unemployment remains a massive challenge. And regional inequality, it persists, because the far north region, that's Tchiroma's political base, it has historically received less infrastructure development compared to the southern regions. This disparity, it has deep historical roots in ethnic linguistic divisions dating all the way back to the colonial era. The trade minister, his public appeals on October 29th for retailers to reopen, that revealed real official concern about the economic losses. Every single day of this shutdown, it represents lost economic activity, reduced tax revenue, and potential damage to investor confidence. Foreign companies operating in Cameroon, they have to be reassessing their stability calculations right now as I speak to you, because these merchants, they faced impossible choices. Open your business, you risk confrontation with the shutdown supporters. Stay closed, you accept the economic losses. Either way, it imposes cost. This shutdown, it exposed these fundamental questions about Cameroon's whole economic structure. Who benefits from the resource wealth, and whose economic participation is essential for the system to even function? Social media, it became central to coordinating and documenting this shutdown, because videos and posts showing empty streets, closed markets, shuttered schools, they were circulating widely across social media. That hashtag, #GhostTownCameroon, it was trending everywhere. I saw one video caption and it read, "This is what democracy looks like when ballots don't count." That just reflects the youth frustration with this whole electoral process. Now, this shutdown, it really represents an evolution in African protest tactics. Think about it. Traditional street demonstrations, they are visible, yeah, but they are vulnerable, because security forces can use tear gas, water cannons, arrest, they can disperse the crowds. But economic boycotts, shutdowns, they operate through collective non-participation, and that is much harder to suppress, at least not without revealing these really authoritarian methods. The social media mobilization was extensive. Instagram Reels, they documented deserted commercial areas. TikTok videos showed closed schools. Facebook groups, they were facilitating communication, and they were asking, how do we implement the shutdown right across different cities? And diaspora Cameroonians, the ones in Europe and North America, they were amplifying these messages, tagging international organizations, the African Union, the European Union. And this pattern, it mirrors other recent African youth movements. For example, Nigeria's EndSARS in October 2020, that mobilized millions protesting police brutality. They used decentralized digital organization even when the government restricted the internet. Ghana's Fix the Country movement back in 2021, that mobilized youth against economic challenges, governance issues, all using hashtag activism. Now, this movement, they share some similar characteristics: youth leadership, digital coordination, and a focus on systematic governance concerns, not just traditional party politics. Africa's demographic reality, that is what is underlying all of this. The continent's median age is under 20, and that creates these massive youth populations. Many young Africans, they have only known one or two leaders their entire lives, and that creates this generational tension, especially when leadership stays concentrated among elderly politicians. We have even seen cultural figures engaging with the moment. The Cameroonian American artist Libianca, she posted videos addressing the election crisis. That brings international attention. Celebrity engagement, it helps amplify these political messages way beyond the traditional activist networks. Now, this shutdown, it demonstrates a kind of power inversion. Traditional protests, they require organization, funding, physical mobilization, all things that can be disrupted. But economic boycotts, they primarily require coordination and collective commitment. Authorities, they can't just arrest an entire population for staying home. They are not just contesting a single election here. They are developing protest methodologies, tactics that could be replicated in other contexts, anywhere where traditional demonstrations is met with violent suppression. So, Cameroon's shutdown, it's happening within this much broader continental context. We have multiple African countries right now with presidents over 75 who have been governing for decades. Uganda's Yoweri Museveni in power since January 1986, nearly 40 years in office. Rwanda's Paul Kagame has held power since the RPF victory in 1994, over 30 years. And many of these leaders, they successfully removed or amended their constitutional term limit. The regional organizations, their response to this crisis has been very disappointing because the African Union, they issued statements kind of combining congratulations to Biya with expression of concern about the violence. They called for inclusive dialogue. The Economic Community of Central African States, ECAS, that's Cameroon's regional bloc, they have maintained relative silence. Analysts noted that ECAS, its member states include governments with long-serving leaders, so there's little incentive for them to strongly criticize electoral processes somewhere else in the region. The European Union, they issued stronger statements. They expressed deep concern about the violent repression, called for accountability and release of detained persons. The West African Civil Society Institute, they condemned the internet restrictions, the protest bans, the use of lethal force, calling them attack on fundamental freedoms. The UN Human Rights Commissioner for Human Rights, he called for investigations into the reported killings. But these statements, they haven't translated into concrete sanctions or policy changes. And the geopolitical stakes here, they are substantial because Cameroon is Central Africa's largest economy. Political instability, it affects foreign investment in oil, in cocoa export, in infrastructure projects. We mentioned Chinese companies. They have invested billions in Cameroon. European and American companies, they maintain operations in the extractive sectors, and regional security cooperation against groups like Boko Haram up in far north, that depends on stable governance. This succession question is still unresolved. Biya is 92, Tchiroma is 76. Even if a political transition did happen, Cameroon will still face questions about generational political access. The fundamental issue, it goes beyond these individual candidates. It's about systematic questions. How does political power transfer between generations? This shutdown tactics, if it's perceived as effective in Cameroon, it could absolutely be adopted by opposition movements in other countries, places where street protests face violent suppression. And if it fails to produce political change, well, it may lead activists towards other more confrontational strategies. So the question facing Cameroon and similar contexts all across Africa, because right now it is happening. Tanzania has been on fire for some days now since their sham election. The similar context is all over Africa. It's whether this youth-led movement using economic boycott can actually force political change in systems where the traditional electoral and protest mechanisms, they just faced severe constraints. Now, if you have watched to this point, I want to say a very big thank you. You are the reason why we are doing this. This is Frontline Africa. Here we talk about Africa. Here we talk about geopolitics from Africa's own point of view. And if you think the battle to reclaim Cameroon from Paul Biya's grip is over, you have to think again, because Cameroon have refused to give up. They have refused to lay down their arms against this stranglehold of Biya on Cameroon, this chokehold that Biya have on Cameroon. They have said they are not going to let it slide. And this latest development about potential military split, because according to Issa Tchiroma, the main opposition guy, he alleged that military, some factions of the military are escorting him to safety. They are basically ensuring his safety. And this suggests that maybe, just maybe, if proven correct, might be a serious game changer in this Cameroon question. So if you are in Cameroon or someone that is well connected and interested in what is happening in Cameroon, maybe you can tell us in the comment section what is happening on ground, and if this is going to bring real change to Cameroon, because we are all hoping and praying that this happens in Cameroon in our lifetime. If you want to see more of my content, maybe consider to subscribe and turn up those notifications. I am your host, Issa Tchiroma Bakary, and I will see you in the next one. It's a bye-bye for now.